if you're practicing home. It's the same with the reading. Band 5, you need 15. Band 6, you need 23. Big jump. Band 7, 30, another big jump. And band 8, 35. So again, if you're practicing at home, use this grid so you get you get an idea of what your band would be. Yeah? And then basically, all of the 4 scores are added up and then divided by 4, and that's your band. Good, there we are. Any questions so far? Don't be shy. No questions. Okay. So let's move on to... Oh, good. Oh, good. So it's all... I mean, most of you will know all this stuff, but there's no harm in recapping everything about the IELTS exam. Good. Now, part 3. These are just the answer sheets. Now, if you've done the test, again, you will have seen these. These are the answer sheets. When you finish the reading, writing, listening, you will then give some time to transfer your answers onto the answer sheets. Let me just say something quickly about the answer sheets. Now, the IELTS test is very, very strict about how you answer. So, for example, if in the test the instruction says, put an X in the box, and you put a 0 in the box, that's not following the instructions, and you could be marked wrongly. So when you do your IELTS test, it is essential you follow exactly the instructions of the test. Some students will, if they've got very, very good use of English, they wonder why their marks go down. And possibly they didn't follow the instructions of the test. If it says put a cross in the box, you put a cross. If it says choose 3 answers, you choose 1, 2, or 3. You don't choose 4. The IELTS test is very, very strict on following instructions. So when you do your IELTS test, make sure you read the instructions very, very carefully. This is your writing answer sheet, your answer booklet. It's very straightforward. You write on the answer sheet. Of course, with the writing, as you all know, it's a question of time. Students run out of time. And just one quick note on this, while we're on the subject. The IELTS examiners have to correct a lot of papers. In fact, under the system, the examiners have to stay in the examining institute until they've finished marking all of the writing. It can sometimes be a big pile at the end of a long day. And if you get a writing paper, the writing is really, really bad, or students have crossed out many, many times, and so it's very difficult to follow the writing, that could affect your mark. So please try to write as neatly as you can. If you make a mistake, cross out the mistake, put it in parentheses, so the examiner can follow your reading. They're not having to try to find out where one part finishes and another part begins. So I know some people have very, very poor handwriting. I do. My handwriting's terrible. But try to write as neatly as you can. If you make a mistake, put a line through it, put it in parentheses. Parentheses. I'm pointing it the wrong way. So the examiner knows where the mistake starts and finishes. But that's the writing paper. And that's just page 3 and 4. Thank you, Emily. Now, this is a sample of the speaking. Now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the speaking test. Now, the speaking test has got 3 parts. Yeah? Now, when you go in the examination room, everybody in the world must get exactly the same speaking test. And to make sure everybody gets exactly the same speaking test, the examiner is reading. The examiner is reading from the sheet that that she or he has in front of them. The examiner cannot enter into a discussion with you. They can't have a chat. So some students will go into the examination room and they'll say, hi teacher, which is fine. But then some students might say, oh, teacher, where are you from? What do you like? Do you like football? What did you eat today? And the teacher cannot enter into a chat because everybody in the world must get the same examination. So when you go in the examination room, just walk in, sit down, and wait for the examiner to start speaking to you. A lot of the questions will allow you to chat, but don't try to have a little conversation with the examiner because it throws them. Just go in, sit down, and wait for the little test. And then the examiner will start, and the examiner is going to start to read the sample speaking. He will ask you the questions and you will answer. Now, you'll notice that there are 3 parts to the speaking test. Now, part 1 is the examiner is going to ask some simple questions about you. About where do you work? Where do you study? Where do you live? What are your hobbies? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite colors? These are all questions about you. So they're very simple questions. Remember, the speaking test has no trick. You're going to get some very simple questions about you. So just answer in 3 or 4 simple sentences. Tell the truth. Never make up anything to make your speaking sound more exciting. Just answer the simple questions about you. Now, the examiner will have 3 sets of questions about you. And each set has got 4 parts. So you could get 12 questions about you. But that's not very usual. Once the examiner's heard enough, they will move on. Now, it's really, really important when you're doing your speaking test to use your normal, everyday voice. And then they stop speaking after 30 seconds of blowing the test. Make simple notes. Now, here's a trick. When you're making simple notes, try to remember to answer the what questions. The what questions. Remember, what, where. If you have these on your piece of paper, and it'll be a great help for you to speak for 2 minutes on your speaking test. Because the worst thing is to stop speaking after 30 seconds. If you have some simple pointers on your note paper, go through the points and 2 minutes will fly past using a normal voice. Finally, part 3, the examiner is going to ask some general questions following on from what you said in part 2. Now, students will say to me, what is the difference between part 1 and part 3? Remember, part 1 are questions about you. Part 3 is general questions about anything following on from what you spoke about. So when you're doing part 3, don't focus on yourself. Focus on answering in a general fashion. Good. Now, I just want to say one last thing about the speaking test. Right at the very beginning of the speaking test, there is a tiny little piece which is not marked. You don't get any marks. That's just to allow you to calm down. So, for example, the examiner might say to you, "Good afternoon. My name's Paul. Can you tell me your full name, please?" You give them your full name in Chinese or English or American, whatever. Then the examiner will say, "What can I call you?" And you can say, "Oh, you can call me Emily." And the examiner will write down your name. Then the examiner will ask you for your ID, the ID you got when you registered. Now, that little part of the test right at the beginning is not marked. It gives you a chance to calm down. So don't worry if you're stressed or you make mistakes, don't worry. It's a little chance for you to calm down. Good. Right, now, again, any questions about that so far? Any questions so far? Good, good, good. That's what I like to see. Now, good, good. Is everyone here from China? Is anybody not from China? If you are not from China, tell me where you are from. Everybody from China? Okay, good. Right. Let's just quickly go through the speaking part of the test. Good, from China. Good. Goody, goody, goody. Now, let's quickly talk about the speaking part of the test. Now, I've already said a little about this. Now, remember, as I've already just said, right at the beginning of the test, the speaking test, there's a small part where the examiner is just going to introduce himself. That gives you the chance to calm down, take a deep breath, because so many students get so stressed out about the test, yeah? Calm down, take a deep breath. And then the examiner is going to ask you the questions about yourself. Secondly, you will be given the long-term speaking. Now, it's important to remember, when you do the long-term speaking, the examiner will they will read the topic to you. And students go, but don't worry, because when the examiner is finished, the examiner will then give you a copy of the question so you can read it. You can read the question. And then, as I say, the examiner will give you 1 minute to make your notes. Now, as I keep saying, it's really important that you make notes. Now, there's two mistakes people make at this point. One, people start to write their entire speech. And after 1 minute, they think they've written a speech, and then they'll say, "Oh, I'm going to talk about a time I was very happy. This time happened to me last week when I was..." And they've run out of information because they're trying to write the whole thing down. No, you cannot. Keywords. What, where, when, why, who. When was I happy? Where was I? Who was I with? What was I doing? Why was I happy? What, where, when, why, who. These should be your keywords. Those are what you're answering. The other mistake people make, and very high-level students do this, particularly I've noticed students from international schools, they write nothing. So when they come to speak, Their answers are very unstructured. They're all over the place. And they get band 5. And they wonder why. It's because there is no structure to what they're saying. I should have mentioned actually earlier, in IELTS, writing and speaking, structure is so important. Structure. Yes. What, where, why, who, when, how. So if I say to you, I want to tell me about a time when I was very happy. When I was in the final year at school. Where? In the playground because it was graduation day. Why? Because it was the last day of school. Who? I was with all my friends. When? It was on the 31st of July 2014. How? It wouldn't apply in this one. If you get those keywords, get some information about each keyword. And what I tell students is, put your finger on each keyword. When? Speak for 20 seconds just on that one keyword. When? Have some little words to remind me, and you'll find that 20 seconds flies past. Then you move on to the next topic, which is where. You've got the where, you've got a few words which will explain where, and then you just fill in the detail, and you will find A, you've got good structure, and B, the time flies. People who don't make good notes, their writing is all over the place, and it's difficult to find any logical structure. So get your notes. And finally, part 3, you then get some questions on a general topic, which come from part 2. Some students get worried about this because, of course, the topic can be basically on anything. Because in part 1 and part 2, the examiner is reading. Part 3, it's a little bit more free. But don't worry, just chat. Normal voice. Don't make a speech. Tell the truth. Have a little chat with the examiner, and you'll find that time will fly. And if you've done a really good job, your test will be quite short. So there's the, I've mentioned this already, I don't need to go into this too much. That's the 3 parts. The interview about yourself, 3.5 to 4.5 minutes. The long turn, 3 to 4 minutes. It's actually 3 to 4 minutes. That's including your preparation time. You don't speak for 3 to 4 minutes. That includes the 1 minute you have for speaking. Part 3, 4 to 5 minutes, related to part 2. Some students get worried because their part 3 may be a little bit short, but often that's a good sign. If the examiner's heard lots of good speaking in part 1 and part 2, part 3 may not need to be so long. It's not always the case. Sometimes you might be doing a really bad job, so the examiner will stop it. But that's the structure of the speaking test. I'm just going to reply to Frank. Now write the keyword. So the keyword might be when. Don't write sentences. You might want to say Saturday, July 14th. That would be enough. So you'd write the keyword when, and then you say, I'm going to talk about the time I was very happy. This time was on a Saturday. I know it was a Saturday because I'm at school through Monday through Friday. So I remember, and on Saturday I went to a big party because there was no school that day. It was on July the 4th, 2014. And I remember this very well because that was the day I graduated from my senior high school. Now, just by writing when Saturday and July the 4th, I've spoken for 20 seconds. The overwhelming thing about the speaking test, and this is almost everybody, they are so stressed. And I can understand why, because the IELTS test is so important for them. But if you look at me, I'm nobody special. I just have a job. The British Council asks me to read questions to students, to listen to what they say, and using the very strict marking scheme of the British Council, I give them a mark. Yeah? That's all my job is. And my job is simply to listen to you, look at the marking scheme, and give you a mark. The examiners are nobody special. Yeah? So don't get freaked out by the examiners. Very often they're English teachers who do this as a part-time job on a Saturday. They are highly trained. When you're an IELTS examiner, you have to go for regular training, and the marking scheme is rigorous. So the examiner is focusing on what you're saying. Yeah? Don't get freaked out by the examiner. So when you go in the classroom, arrive nice and early at the testing room and sit so you can calm down, and just keep in mind the examiner is nobody special. They're just paid to listen to you speak. They're not making a judgment on you. They're listening and giving you a mark. And if you look at me, I'm a nice person. I'm just like a normal person. I'll go out and I'll eat and drink and have fun. I'm nobody special. None of the examiners are anybody special. So don't get freaked out. If you're late, you will not be able to do the test. So don't be late. Now, another thing that people get really freaked out about is they'll go in and there's a recording device on the table. And the examiner's recording information about you, your name, the date, etc. And that freaks out so many people. I will try to do it before the student enters the room. But for some reason, the student enters and they see this machine, they think, oh my God, someone's going to be... They get really freaked out. No. Yeah? The only reason why that is there's two reasons. Is one, if you complain about your mark, someone will use that recording to double check. It's not there so Big Brother's watching you, and it's obviously there. It's done for quality control, but in the vast majority of times, nobody is going to listen to that recording. Don't get freaked out by the machine. It's just one of the procedures. Yeah, don't worry about the machine. As I said before, don't enter into a conversation with the examiner. Just sit down, take a deep breath, and answer the questions. Make sure you have an English name ready, because I know it sounds terrible, but a lot of the examiners are not native Chinese speakers. So, any language when you're using a second language can be tricky. It's much simpler if you have an English name ready, so the examiner can refer you to as Frank or Emily. Now, another thing which students get confused about, when you're doing your long-term speaking, the examiner might stop you. That's not a bad thing. Very often it's a good thing. It's because you've spoken for 2 minutes and the examiner will stop you. A, because that's what they're told to do, and B, is because there are other people waiting for their test. It is not bad if the examiner stops you on your 2-minute speaking. Personally, I prefer students to stop themselves after about 1 minute and 45 seconds, because then I know you've got the complete structure of a spoken answer. But don't worry if the examiner stops you because you've gone on for too long. Worry if you stop speaking after 30 seconds because you haven't spoken enough. But don't worry if the examiner stops you. Right. And I've already mentioned the last 2 points before. When you're speaking, IELTS is a test of everyday, normal English. Don't give a speech. Don't use formal business English. Imagine you're talking to your friend. and use exactly the same language you would speak to an English-speaking friend. Nice and informal, normal conversation. If you know some colloquial English or some little idioms, that's good. Hi is far better than saying, oh, good morning, sir, how are you? Everyday, normal English, just like you would when you're speaking to your friends. And finally, I'm from the UK. Whether the IELTS is a British-Australian exam. In Britain, we don't care what people wear. We never judge a person on what people wear or if they have earrings or whatever. So it doesn't matter how you dress. You don't need to dress up formally or worry that the examiner's going to worry about what you're wearing. The examiner doesn't give a hoot. The exam is purely listening to what you're saying. So don't worry about what you wear. Phew! I've spoken a long time. Any questions? Someone ask a question to make me feel important. Good. So, I hope you're getting the message. Go in there and have a nice chat. Using good structure, simple everyday language. Don't talk too long. Don't have conversations with the examiner. Just go in and answer the questions freely and easily, and you'll do well in the test. Hello.
Hi, Paul.
Yes.
How are you? I have a question.
Yes.
May I know how I speaking can be called comfortable to communicate with the examiner?
As I say, and exactly as you're saying now, use everyday normal English, just like you would if you were talking to your friend. Use everyday normal English as though you're speaking to your friend. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Right, now, how do you get marked? How do you get marked? This is how you'll get marked. When you do this IELTS test, you get marked on fluency and coherence. What does that mean? People think fluency means using very, very complex English. It doesn't. Fluency means speaking naturally, just like water flowing. It's not about using horribly complex grammar and horribly complex vocabulary. No, it's speaking so your language flows normally, just like I'm speaking now. And there's a question, no. Someone's asking, what happens if I don't understand the examiner? There's a very strict rule on this. The examiner will ask you the question. The examiner will say, can you tell me last time you went to the beach? And you might not understand. So you say, excuse me, I don't understand. All the examiner can do is read the same question again, but more slowly. You will not lose marks for asking the examiner to repeat themselves. You will not lose marks. But similarly, the examiner cannot help you. They will simply say the same question again, but a little slower. So they'll say, could you tell me about a time you had a good time at the beach? They can't help you. I know some examiners do, but they're not supposed to. They're supposed to repeat the question more slowly. But important, no, you don't lose marks. I'm going to go at an angle here. I'm going to say something slightly different. If you're speaking and you think you've made a mistake, don't keep talking. Correct yourself. Say, oh, sorry, I made a mistake. What I meant was, and you can actually get more marks. Because in everyday English, if you correct yourself, that's what we do normally. It's normal English. So if you make a mistake, correct yourself and continue speaking. It's a good thing. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention one last thing about the long-term speaking. I said I like students to speak for 1 minute and 45 seconds. Now, there's one thing some students do which I really don't like. The students will talk, blah, 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 and then they'll just stop. And it's a little bit embarrassing because the examiner doesn't know if you finished. So when you've finished your long-term speaking, make it clear you're finished. The simplest way is by saying, thank you, or that's it. But when you do your long-term speaking, let the examiner know when you've finished, so there's no embarrassing silence. But it was a good question. So fluency and coherence. One, fluency, your answer flows and it sticks together. Now, what some students do, often some very good students, I'll ask them a question. I'll say, what do you like doing in your free time? And then they'll shout out, I like going swimming, I like going dancing, I like going walking. The answers are not joined. They're not coherent. It's not joining together. You say, oh, sometimes I like to go dancing with my friends, or maybe if it's raining, I'll stay home and watch TV. Join the sentences together. Yeah? Join the sentences together. Yeah? It makes this is what it means by coherence. Don't shout out sentences which are not joined, because that's not coherent. And fluency, just continue speaking, and that's where you're going to get your marks. Vocabulary. A lot of students get very confused about vocabulary. English, the IELTS test is a test of normal, everyday English. And so a lot of students try to use vocabulary which is far too complex, and they're not completely sure of the meaning of the words. Again, yes, it's good if you got some good complex vocabulary, but don't use complex words if you're not sure exactly what they mean. It's better to just talk in sentences using normal English. It's the same with grammar. If you listen to me speaking to you today, I'm not using the present perfect passive continuous voice. I'm using simple grammar, simple structures. Don't focus on over complex grammar. And pronunciation, of course, is a problem, because the examiner's got to be able to understand you. So very often I think punctuation is the aspect of the speaking test which lets people down. You must work on accent reduction. If you've got a thick accent, go online and find some sites about how to reduce your accent, because it's a two-way thing. Sometimes the examiner's difficult to understand, sometimes the student's difficult to understand. So be careful about your punctuation, your pronunciation. Yeah, make sure that it's not too complex. And as I say, if you look at the writing below, there are some sample recordings which you can listen to after class. So you'll notice in all this, what I'm emphasizing on is use normal, everyday English in a normal voice. So, tips for speaking. I've already mentioned some of these, but again, any questions before I move on? Anybody got any questions? Good. Okay, I'll move on for some tips for speaking. Obviously, number one, you've got to speak English. This is a test of English. Yeah? Don't answer with one-word answers, because, again, it's not natural English. Make sure when you're answering, 2 or 3 simple sentences is often enough. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Oh, my name's Paul. I'm from a city in the north of England, and I work as an English teacher. 2 or 3 simple sentences. The examiner will very quickly get an idea of your level. By what we're doing today is answering the next question. If you know what's involved in the test, it's going to be easier for you. As I keep mentioning, sound natural. Now, if you look at the next point, I think this is very important. I think it's really important. When you go in the examining room, smile. Be happy. The students are like this. They look terrified and their hands go over their mouth. And because the students who come in and they're very happy, very positive, they might be terrified inside, but if they look happy and smile, answer the questions, the answer's easy, it's an easy exam for the examiner, they're going to get the high mark. If you're stressed and you're doing this and you're whispering, that's a bad way to the test. So even though no matter how tense and stressed you are, be happy and be positive. Use a wide range of vocabulary. This is good. It doesn't mean use complex, fake vocabulary you wouldn't use in everyday life. Use a wide range of vocabulary you're used to. Don't use artificially complex vocabulary. And finally, when you speak clearly. When people are stressed, as I've already said, they start doing this, or they'll speak clearly. Can I hear what they're saying? Be positive and be happy. Yes, that's a very good point. Look calm. And it's very difficult because, some people come in the exam and they're actually shaking with fear. Just remember, as I've said already, the examiner is nobody special. Use normal, everyday English. Speak as much as you can. Use a range of simple grammar and vocabulary, and you'll be fine. This, again, being fluent. What this is basically saying is answer the question. Answer the question. It's very, very important you answer the question and don't go on to another topic. When you're finished answering the question, stop speaking. Now, this is an interesting thing. This is the next one, eye contact. I get a lot of comments about this. You should be keeping an eye contact with the examiners. But many of my students say the examiner didn't look at them. Don't let this freak you out. Many people think if the examiner's not looking at them, they've somehow done something wrong. No. It might be that the examiner might be one of these people who don't like keeping an eye contact. Or the examiner might be writing or reading, making remarks. But as far as you're concerned, try to keep eye contact. It'll help you look positive and calm. So, good. That's an important point. Now, when you finish the class, not now, but after class, there's some stuff you can do. Yeah, these are examples of the interview, the IELTS interview. And what I'd like you to do after class, if you have some time, is just go onto this page and listen to some sample interview questions. Yeah, and listen to if you listen carefully to how the people are answering, as I keep saying, it'll be 2 or 3 simple sentences, simple grammar, simple vocabulary correctly used. I don't mean dumb down. I just mean use normal, everyday English in a way that you're used to using. Just before we finish, you'll see, look how simple the questions are. Let's talk about your home village. What kind of place is it? Now, my last comment today, answer the questions. A common mistake is I'll say to students, tell me about your hometown. And students will say, I'm from Harbin. I live there with my family. My family like to go swimming at the weekend. My family are lovely. I didn't ask about your family. I asked about your hometown. It's essential you answer the questions. And as I say, after class, I'm just flicking through these. There's some examples of what you can do after class. Good. So thank you, everybody. I hope that was useful. I know a lot of you know all this stuff already, but it doesn't do any harm to recap. So thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye. Say bye-bye to me. Come on, type bye-bye. Good. Oh, thank you. Have a lovely day, everybody. Bye-bye.